Välkommen alla sammen. Got a question from someone about stone use in the Norse world, and were kind of stones or crystals used for magical purposes back in pagan times. And they sent me a video of another pagan YouTuber speaking about this subject, and it was a load of shit. It was a load of shit. I'm not saying any names because I would rather always make friends than enemies, but we can't just go making up things about history. So here in this video I'm going to speak about the sources, about what the actual magical usage of stones has been dating back to pagan times. First of all, because it's very interesting, and a lot of these modern spiritual people like collecting these stones. I even have a couple myself. It's not my thing really, just had some girlfriends that got me into it, but more importantly, stones play an incredibly important role in the Old Norse religion, and they're a central part of the burial practice, really, and it was believed to have some sort of influence on afterlife and reincarnation. Long subject, I'll go into that. I'm working on a long video about that, but for now, let's just understand what the sources say about specifically the magical use of stones, not necessarily like these burial mounds that we find or these rune stones, like specific stones that can believe to have some sort of spiritual energy, because that's going to be important coming back to this idea of animism and the idea of some sort of energy even in stones. So we have numerous folk tales that speak about the use of stones magically and medicinally all the way up until the 1800s. For example, we find Danish soldiers using smooth sea stones just like this one, put it in their mouth and sucked on them to ward off thirst and hunger. But of course, a lot of these other folk tales, they come from 1600s and later, so there's no way that we can know if these can be dated back to pagan times. A lot of them definitely can, but no way to know for sure. So I'm just going over the actual sources from pagan times. Often the best sources we actually have for real pagan practice is Christian law books written shortly after the conversion, basically telling us what not to do, which pagan practices were now illegal once Christianity had came into a society. So the earliest one we have very early here is Penitential from Archbishop Theodore. He permitted the use of stones and herbs for those affected by an evil spirit, it says in that book, but prohibited incantations. So you could use the stones, but you weren't allowed to sing chants or guldet over them, as they would call it. Another law, Grogs from Norway, that states that people shall not have stones about them or fill them with magic power in order to tie onto people or people's cattle. And the penalty for that was outlawry. So basically, if you put on a stone on yourself, hung it from a necklace or something, or from your cow either, that means you would get a pretty severe punishment for that. Another one, Upplandslov, it forbids knowledge surrounding stones. That one is not too specific, but basically, I mean, you can see these guys, how many, how some of these things, how a lot of this knowledge was lost because just having knowledge of these things was illegal. How can knowledge of something be illegal? But, that's what the law books are. Another one from a little bit later, Bishop Baldur. He heard rumors that some pretended to invoke spirits in nails, mirrors, rings, or stones. So, definitely some sort of idea here that some spiritual energy was there within these inanimate objects to be invoked, or so was believed. I'll go into one more. This one is very late. It's a few hundred years after pagan times, but it's just, this one gets a bit more specific, so I'll speak about that. Some Germans who published this book here, I'll put these up top, they permitted the use of stones and herbs to drive away witchcraft at this time. So basically before that, the use of all stones for any purpose was illegal, but at this time they were now permitted to use stones to drive away witchcraft, so that tells us something there. That's all the law codes for now, but I'll go over some of the mentions in the sagas. Now these are important because these are sagas dated, telling about pagan times. So first is in Eriks Saga the Red. she wore, the witch here, the Völva, about to perform, say that she wore beads, and she had a staff with a brass bound knob studded with stones. So definitely staves and stones believed to have some magical power there. Another saga, Tustens Saga. Basically, I'll put this text up here too, but he was basically given a stone and a nail, and he was said to hammer it, and whatever kind of spark or colors that would come out of it would be a predictor of the weather in that story. So that's interesting too. Another one in Laxdärla Saga, he had a sword and he had a stone built into the hilt of this sword, and this stone was believed to have some magic use, and he could heal the wounds that sword inflicted. The sword's name was fruitful. So one that was much later on in time. This is a law case, actually. The only reason I'm going into this is because it gives a lot of detail, even though it's pretty late on. It was a law code of witch that was caught in Södertälje in Sweden, and it basically accused her of witchcraft and using stones, and in her defense she said she was not using the stones for witchcraft, but she would use them. She helped a customer of hers win a law case. So stones there believed to win a law case, and here is a list right here of the contents of her bag that they confiscated. And like I said, I only included that one in the sagas about pagan times because we don't have any specific details about what stones or crystals were used, and anyone who tells you different is lying. So this is pretty much all the sources we have. But like I said, there comes a lot more in these folk tales and witch trials from the 1600s onwards. But I will say, don't ever forget how closely Thor's hammer and stones were associated. I did a video about that. It was almost equivalent to a stone. Thor's hammer was of course called Mjolnir, but it was also referred to in the Eddas as Hamar, which could mean hammer or stone. And this is what we think an early version of it is. Also the equivalent of Thor, Hercules in the Greek and Roman mythology. He was, instead of a hammer, he actually had a stone, he had a club, and we find exactly little pendants like this from much before the Viking Age. So if we, not Viking Age maybe, but if we go back a lot later on in time, stones seem to be equivalent to Thor's hammer. So do with that information what you will. I'll speak about that in another video. But before I finish, I'll go over the burials because like I said, the sources don't give much information about what exact stones or crystals were used. So here are some here. These are all burials from the Viking Age and before. Well, this one is from Denmark, and all of these items were in her bag. Now the reason I'm showing these, we found stones in a ton of different graves in the Viking Age, and but these I'm including specifically because they were believed to have some sort of magical purpose. They were found in pouches on the hip, or they were found in pockets or things like that. So these were not stones just used as grave fill or like for burial mounds or these other types of purposes that we see here. These were stones that were pretty sure belonged to a witch who was in this grave, and then these stones were used for different magical purposes. And I'm showing you quite a few of them here. You can come back and read. And also a lot of these pictures are very hard to find, or else I would put some pictures up here too. These are just descriptions, and yeah, some of these digs go back more than 100 years, and they were not super diligent when they dug up these graves. They didn't take many good pictures or give good sketches, so yeah, the descriptions are the best we have on a lot of these, but that's about it. That's all I'll say for this video, and I'll also link below a free article online where it has a lot of different information about these types of things, but that's all. This video is just to kind of get the idea that stones maybe, or were believed in ancient times to have some sort of spiritual energy. And we can explain this a little bit better when we look at the Norse idea of animism. Everything comes back to animism in our religion. Everything. Understanding of the universe, the gods, inanimate objects, everything. And animism is just simply the belief that every object has some kind of spiritual energy. And we can agree with this to a certain extent. We do, of course, yeah, we know we have a spirit, we know we have a soul, you know, probably animals too, maybe even trees, you know. But no, wait, look, hold on a sec. Rocks, this ring, this sword, does this have some sort of spiritual energy too? And the Norse idea of the spirit and the soul provides some information on this. Like I said, watch my video on Draupnir, that we have 8 parts to our soul. Maybe animals only have 6 or 5. Maybe a tree only has 3 or 4. Maybe a rock only has 1 or 2 of these. But this is, you know, the general belief that there is some sort of spiritual energy in everything. And when you start to really understand animism, things become a lot more simple in our religion and any other pagan religions in the world. So this is just a starting video, and I'm working on a really long, good one about the use of stones in burials and how important they were, and perhaps how they could have had influence on the afterlife and reincarnation and things like that. But that one is going to take a lot of research, so I'm working on that one now. But that's it for today. Vi ses nästa gång.